Hello everybody, welcome to our TNT Teaching and Learning webinar this evening, which is on Stretch and Challenge, and it's delivered by our special guest speaker, Torsten Payne. So my name's Avril Townsend. I've been a science teacher for nearly 20 years now, and myself and Gary, we decided to host these webinars to give back to teachers and hopefully share useful research and strategies with all teachers across the world. So welcome to any attendees that have been here previously, but also to any newcomers and are attending for the first time today. So welcome to everybody. We're really fortunate to have people signed up from over 30 countries across the world. So we just welcome everybody and hope that everybody can get something useful to use in their own classrooms this evening.
Hi everyone, my name is Gary Talbot and I've been a science teacher as well. And we're really lucky to have Torsten with us this evening. This has been our biggest sign up so far for all the webinars we've done. So thank you very much for joining us. And just a few housekeeping rules before we start. So Torsten, will you put the next slide on? So there are two features in the webinar, Zoom webinar. There's the Q&A function feature. So you should see a little icon with the Q&A. That's just to ask specific questions that you might want to ask to Torsten at the end of the webinar, and if we have some time we'll go through and Torsten will try to attempt to answer those questions. And then there's the chat function, which a lot of you have started to use already. That's just where you might see an activity that Torsten goes through and you might have used that in a different way and you want to share that with other people in the group. If there is an interactive activity where we want you to discuss things, then there'll be this little symbol here with the people thing, and I'll explain how we're going to do that. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Torsten, and I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Torsten, for joining us, and hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Let's have a look. Oh, there we go, that's me. Yeah, I've actually taught mainly religious studies, but I've been involved in lots of different aspects of schools for over 20 years. Well, most of these ideas come from a book. I actually did the training quite a long time before and was quite often asked if there was one resource where you could get them all, so that's it. But let's get started. So going back to this, if you had a chance to look at this, here's some old school reports of famous people, and you can just see how well you did. So number one, vocabulary negligible, sentences malconstructed, reminds me of a camel. That's a great school report. That was Roald Dahl. Number two, has glaring faults, and they've certainly glared at us this term, is Stephen Fry. Number three, has no ambition, cannot be trusted to behave himself anywhere. By the way, if it says, if I've put it in italics, it's just where I've made it gender neutral. But that's Winston Churchill, can't be trusted anywhere. Number four, would be a very good pupil if they lived in this world, is Dame Judi Dench. Number five, certainly on the road to failure, is John Lennon, which means Adolf Hitler got moral conduct very satisfactory. Clearly, even teachers can make mistakes at times. So, oh, that was what I wanted. Here we go. So many years ago, I originally sort of got into this because I was made a gifted and talented coordinator, and my starting point was to consider, you know, why should we plan for the more able students? You know, why was their education any more important than anybody else's? And one of the first things I came across was this piece of research where they'd surveyed a couple of thousand able students to say, what is it you like from lessons? When do you learn best? And I'm not going to read through all the answers. One of the benefits of having this on a video is that you can obviously rewatch it if you really want to see it more than once, and stop and have a bit more time to take in any things that pique your interest. Otherwise, I'm going to try and rattle through things fairly quickly. My thinking is that the more things I cover, the more likely there is to be things that you can take away and use. So I will point out a couple here though. Teachers with a sense of humour, but you know, who doesn't like having a bit of a sense, dealing with somebody who's got a sense of humour. This one was interesting, being allowed to have an off day. if you only see your students for 1 or 2 lessons a week and you think, I've done this particular thing because I just want to see how these particularly bright kids get on with it, and then they're just having an off day. But of course, we're all human beings, and that's occasionally a natural thing. What I really took from looking at all of that, though, was who doesn't want all of those things, no matter what their ability level is going to be. And I found that very reassuring, because my big concern was I didn't want this to be elitist in any way at all. But what this sort of gave me a slightly different focus, which was what strategies could I use to stretch and challenge all students, wherever they're starting from, give them the chance and encouragement to go as far as they possibly could. So just thinking, where do we usually start? We often start with the class when we get their data and we have a look through. And you've had the chance here, you can see the little icon in the corner of the 2 people on the speech bubbles. In a test or assessment, how many reasons can you think of for a student to underachieve? Why might they not get a score that shows what they're really capable of? So I'll leave that to you to think about. But the opposite is also true. In any test or assessment, how many reasons can you think of for a student to overachieve? I can only think of one, which is blind luck. You know, either they guess really well on multiple choice, or it's just something they happen to see the day before the test. But that's pretty much it. Whereas I think there are a whole lot of reasons why they can underachieve. So I would say that data sets the minimum. That's the least they're capable of, assuming they're still working hard. Obviously, if that was a test and then they've since stopped working entirely, it's going to be quite difficult, but that's the minimum that they are capable of. One of the best examples of this, and this goes back a few years to when Year 7s used to have cats, but I remember a Year 7 girl, she'd come up to the school with the whole year group, and her primary teachers had said, "This is the cleverest student we have ever seen. She is exceptional." And that was something that which we'd all very much agree with. Within a few weeks, thought, yeah, she really is. And we had to invigilate and walk up and down while they did the national CATS tests. And this was one of the questions. I didn't actually see this, one of the other teachers did. But this was one of the questions. It was just, what's the odd one out? And he was looking over her shoulder as she rattled through a few. And this one stuck in his mind because out of root, leaf, seed, and branch. Now, for me, it would seem that the odd one out would be seed. It's the only one that's not part of a tree. But she had ticked branch, and it just seemed a really odd mistake to make for a girl who was that bright and that sort of fastidious about her work. So when they'd all finished and they were off going out to break, he just sort of called her aside and said, "Oh, there's one question I saw. Why did you say branch?" And she said, "Oh, the others are all homophones." At which point you kind of nod sagely and quickly run to the dictionary. So homophone, a word that's pronounced the same as another but differs in its meaning, like flowers in the meadow and flour you make bread with. So are the rest all really homophones? Well, your roots can be your route, your journey to something. You can see things with your eyes across the room. Is leaf a homophone? Well, apparently it is, although not one I'd ever heard of before this. So that girl, as far as the CATS marking, you know, that particular test, oh, there we go, was concerned, she'd got that wrong and she'd dropped some marks. But clearly she wasn't wrong. She was just operating at a level far above what they were really expecting from a Year 7 student. So we'd love it if we could turn all our students into geniuses. Genii, I should know that really, shouldn't I? And there was a really interesting piece of work, some study going on in Exeter, and just their conclusions quickly were that actually no one knows where genius comes from. They looked at all kinds of factors and it seemed quite random. So then they thought genius tends to be a word that we attribute in hindsight, not really during people's lifetimes. So they looked back at some people like Beethoven and Newton, people who I don't think anybody would argue that they were clearly geniuses in their area, and said, well, what did their contemporaries say? What were other composers saying about Beethoven or Mozart? What were other scientists saying about Newton? And they found the same phrases came up time and time again, which were doggedness, persistence, which is pretty much the same thing, concentration, and intense curiosity. So the conclusion of this whole thing was that the qualities that set geniuses apart from other people are ones of temperament and personality, rather than narrowly intellectual ones. And that's great, because if they'd just said, yep, it's genetic, then what we could do as a teacher would be very limited. But actually, it really isn't. These are skills that pretty much anyone can learn. Napoleon said the same thing a couple hundred years earlier, when he said success goes to the most persevering. Not necessarily some nebulous term like the best or the brightest, but just the one who keeps going until they achieve what they wanted. And Napoleon knew a fair bit about success, given that he took over a good chunk of the world. And even when he ultimately failed, they gave him his own island and named a brandy after him. And that's the kind of failure I could live with quite happily. So what do we want to do to stretch and challenge our students? Any task we ever set them, you could sort of divide and place somewhere in these two continuum. Is it easy access? Can they just get on with it? Or is it difficult? They need a lot of explanation, a lot of knowledge beforehand, teacher talking them through. And how challenging? Low challenge, no effort really, or high challenge, yeah, they really have to apply themselves. And there is a place for tasks all over this. Revision is low challenge because you're doing stuff you've already done, but it's difficult access. It assumes a lot of prior knowledge, but revision is clearly very important. If you've just had them standing for 20 minutes on a windy field because of a fire alarm on a Friday afternoon and you get them back into your class for 20 minutes, you probably need to do something here just to settle them back down again. But in terms of stretch and challenge, the bit we really want is up there. It's the high challenge, but the easy access. They don't have to listen for too long, but they can get straight into it and take it as far as they're able. So what does that high challenge look like? You'll probably recognize Bloom's taxonomy there. There are other taxonomies available. Sound like the BBC then. You've got roads and rags and stuff. I just went with this because it's the one that I thought would be the most recognizable for everyone. They all sort of differentiate between higher and lower level abilities. So how do we get up here? How do we really get them thinking? Open questions. Yep, that'll work. That's incredibly old and very simple, but absolutely that'll work. Higher order thinking, and we'll look at some ways that you can sort of get that. How can we make them use these skills? A chance to shine, that's really important. It's really worth looking over a scheme of work and thinking, where are their chances for them to shine? Where can they, the ones who are really good at this topic, how can they show me just how good they are? Because if there's a lot of exercises to sort of bring everybody up to a certain standard, but not much opportunity to go beyond, and then you'll never know who the ones are who really can take it a lot further. If you certainly probably can't do that every lesson, but if the only opportunity is the test at the end of the term, then that probably needs to have a couple more opportunities put in. Structures of gaps and choices. That sounds really simple, but that's really important. Because if you have a table and they have to plug the gaps, then they have to understand how the structure works. And again, if there's choices, if there's gaps, then so they're analysing, they're understanding it, they're applying that knowledge, they're analysing what are the missing bits. And if there's a choice, then they're evaluating, why is this a better choice than that one? Why would I put this detail in that gap instead? And also freedom to make their own connections. I think this is also really important. Creativity is something that's incredibly hard to teach, but it's really, really easy to stifle. And when I was sort of putting some of this together and thinking about this, I realized that I was very much guilty of that, especially when I did question and answer with students. It was really, what I was really doing was saying, who can guess what's in my head, rather than really just letting them think for themselves. I had the answer I wanted, and it was trying to get them to that. And then I thought I should try and give more opportunities where there's more than one answer, where they can think for themselves. And very soon after that, about one of the first things I tried out, I'll come to that in a second. Renzulli did a lot of work on teaching sort of how to stretch people. And he said there are 3 things you need to really, really succeed to be considered maybe gifted, several years ahead of your peers in something. Above average ability, which is a difficult one to define. but it's quite interesting, the 3. He said, task commitment, you just got to be prepared to put in the hard work. And the creativity again, you know, to be able to come up with new links or new ways of doing something. He said that's what makes it truly exceptional. So when I was trying to give them more choice, more freedom to make their own connections, this was something I showed to a year 7 class, bunch of 11-year-olds, and it's a piece by Banksy. And rather than just using this as a quick example and moving on or a discussion point, I started by giving it to them and saying, what do you think his point is? What's the point the artist is trying to make here? And to me, you know, it seemed fairly obvious that it was saying that Christmas and Easter were far too over-commercialised, but I just wanted to see if they would come to that by themselves or what else they'd come up with. And one boy said, came up with the answer, life is a gift, which I thought was a great answer. It never occurred to me. I don't know if that was, you know, a little bit of luck, or whether he also knew about Christian teachings and the sanctity of life, but I thought that was just a great answer, which had never occurred to me. Although I would like to point out that I did Google it and I was right. Okay, what have we got here? Oh yeah. So how many uses are there for a brick is a very standard old one, and sort of a lateral thinking test, but depending on what topic we're teaching them, there are loads of things we could pick. You know, is the island, is that, you know, how many uses are there? Is it study in leisure and tourism? Is it a rehabilitation clinic? Is it marine biology? Is it a nature reserve? You know, how many things could it possibly be used for? So if you can pick something that's to do with the lesson and just let them see how many things, it's just again giving them that chance to be a bit creative. And a plenary at the end, which works really well, is how could these things be linked to the lesson? Now you can have some pictures for things that were mentioned, but you can also just have a couple of random things, and it's just trying to see if they can sort of do that metaphorical thinking of thinking, well, you know, maybe it's a bit like a puzzle because I understood this bit, but somebody else had to give me that bit of information to we put together, we sort of pieced it all together and figured it out. And that's a really good indicator of some high level thinking if they can start to apply more abstract concepts. Okay, so freedom to make their own connections, and finally, some autonomy or self-direction. So being able to have a little say in what they do. Anything we set for them, any work we set, you can sort of split into these 4 categories. The task, what is it they have to do? How are they going to do it? Is it a, you know, is it a poster, a PowerPoint? Are they going to stand up and give a speech to the class? They're going to write an essay? Are they going to do a play? Completely. Time, when we do it. Okay, and the team, who we work with. Now, true autonomy, as you can see, is where it's all there, and that's just chaos. And there's also not much challenge there, because if you just say ancient Egyptians, off you go, they're not going to have a clue where to start. None of us would really. But if you let them choose maybe one of those, they'll be a lot more invested in it because they've had a say in doing it, and it just gives them that tiny bit more independence. So any of them, you know, it could be the team who they work with. They're obviously going to choose their friends, but if they know that, you know, if this doesn't work, you'll never work with them again, then they're incentivized to try and make it a success. The time's an interesting one because, you know, they'll probably want a whole term to do it, and that's clearly not feasible. But it's interesting for them to sort of have a quick discussion and then a negotiation with you. But immediately then they're starting to think ahead and plan of, all right, well, what stages are we? How long will each one take? And when they start, they'll be far, far better organised than if they hadn't have had that discussion. And technique, you know, there are loads and loads of ways of assessing people, and it's quite nice occasionally to let them play to their strengths, see what they can do well. The group work's an interesting one though. The man on the left there is Biblatane, who was a psychologist who studied this, and he coined the term social loafing, which he said if you give the same task to a group of people, what typically happens is you get 1 or 2 people who do all the work and the rest just stand around and watch. And to check this out, he did a quite nice simple experiment. He asked people to sit in a little studio, clap as loudly as they could, and there was a device to measure how many decibels, how loud they were. He put headphones on them so they couldn't hear themselves and to see. And he tested them by themselves, and then he tested them in groups of 4, all sat together, and then in groups of 6. And what he found was that the more people there were, the less individual effort everybody put in, hence his theory about social loafing. One interesting thing about this was they repeated it in countries all over the world, and pretty much America and Europe, same results everywhere. The exception was China, where it really didn't matter whether they were by themselves or in a group. So they put the same effort in every time. It just seems to be a bit of a different work ethic. So what can we do with group work? Because I'm certainly not suggesting that you only let your Chinese students work in groups. I will say this about group work as well. Ofsted have really criticised it in the past, particularly if it's set by table. This one table does this task, and the second table does this, and the teachers sort of set them by ability and give them different tasks. Now, I have seen that done, especially in primary, and it worked really well. The kids didn't seem too traumatised by it. I think what Ofsted assume we're doing is saying, table 1, here's your equation, you have 10 minutes, I want the answer with all the workings out. And by the time you get to table 4, it's table 4, find the duck. So, obviously that's being facetious, but there is that thing. And there's also maybe the danger of whoever's most confident just completely dominating the group and hogging it all, just taking over. So 3 quick ideas as to how to stop any one person taking over, to make sure that everybody gets an equal say, including the ones who are a bit quieter. Talking chips, I think this came from Kagan originally. So if they give, it depends how long you want the discussion to go for, but if you say, all right, everybody grab 2 things. Back in the days when we used to be able to pass things around the classroom, I actually bought a set of poker chips and they quite like that. But nowadays I'll say, okay, pick up your pen and pencil. Those are your talking chips. I'm going to give you a topic to discuss. And when you want to say something to the group, you put one of them down in front of you, because you've only got only 2 times you can contribute to the conversation. Pardon me. So they'll say something, somebody else will put their pen down and reply, and then they can put their pencil. And that's it. Everybody sort of gets an equal turn. Some of them might speak for a bit longer, but everybody will get it. And it works incredibly well for such a simple idea. It's really worth repeating because they get more used to it. You can see the frustration in some of the talkative ones who've used up both of theirs straight away, and then they just can't add anything. But you also find that they give better answers because they want to make the most of their opportunity to speak. So they'll not only just say, yeah, that's rubbish. They'll say, yeah, that's rubbish because, and then they'll go on to give explanations. Okay, number 2.
Torsten, we just lost your sound for a second. If you can still hear us. I think you just might have pressed mute or something like that. Sorry, everyone. We just lost Torsten for a second there. There you go, Torsten. You're back.
We're back. Fantastic. You're back. Okay, I think I got to the carousel, which was the idea is you can ask students a question. So in RS, we were doing the reasons why people might want to get married. That was sort of a starter activity. How many different reasons, good and bad, but just how many reasons could you think of? But what they did was they would write one reason down and then pass their book on in sort of to the left, and they'd go around a little circle, and you would look at what was already there and then had to add another reason that was different. And then you pass it on, you get somebody else's book and pass it. Obviously we can't do the passing at the moment, but they can just sit there and say it, and then they all write it, but they had to do it. Works really well because they'll end up with a number of ideas which they probably wouldn't have thought of themselves by having compared it across the group. They sort of vet each other's ideas straight away as they're doing it. Somebody will put something down and somebody will say, no, you can't have that because of this. And they're, oh, okay, right, yeah. So it it weeds all of those ideas out. Also, if you want a bit of feedback and you want to pick on somebody, you can sort of pick on the students who perhaps would normally be quieter and shy and a bit more reticent to do this, because if you say, all right, give us one of your reasons, well, you know they've got a list in front of them, and not only that, it's a list that's been checked by several other students, and they can even give an answer that wasn't theirs, so they feel a lot more confident in saying something that's not going to be silly. Right, third one for how to sort of stop the hogs is jigsaw technique. Sometimes it's also called expert groups, developed in, I think 60s by Aronson, an American psychologist. I'll show you an example. This is GCSE psychology. I feel I sort of picked this as an example, and I feel I should explain it now. Freud, who had some brilliant ideas and some that were barking mad. One of his ideas was that as we grow up, we go through 5 different stages. So the oral stage for babies who can suckle, and that's about all they can do really, to the anal stage, by which it's sort of potty training. It was just getting control of your body for the first time, and into phallic and latent and then genital for the rest of your life. So you can do this for sort of any topic, but the idea is to split it into, I always find 5 works quite well. So you split it into 5 sections. So if it was a person, you could do, you know, their early life, their you know, first jobs or whatever, and then the bit they were famous for if you're doing it, and then what the politics at the time or something. You know, 5 categories. And you number the students in the class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you say, okay, all the number 1s come over here. You're the first group. Here's your information sheet. And I'd give them the oral bit and say, you are the only people in the class who are looking at that. And all the number 2s are the anal group. That goes well. So number 2s, you're the experts on this. And the 3s and phallic. And the idea is that they go through and they have a few minutes as an expert group to discuss it, to read it through, make sure they understand it. If they really get stuck and nobody can figure it out, they can ask the teacher. But ideally, they can sort of try to make sense of it themselves. And then they spend a couple of minutes trying to remember what they think are the most important bits before they then go back to their original kind of seating plan where they were sat in different groups. And you'll have one person who's seen the oral bit, one person who's seen the anal, one who's seen the phallic. And if you give them something like this and say, okay, fill that in. Have a chat in your groups, and you've got 10 minutes or so, fill in as much as you can. I mean, I would tend to then go through the sheets and show everybody just to double check they've all got the important bits. But they had to listen to each other because only one person in their group has covered the whole section 1 and only one person's done 2. So they have to listen to, you can't have one person just hogging the whole thing or one person who's particularly good at memory trying to do everything. You can, you know, you rarely have numbers that add up perfectly, so you can sort of say, all right, there's 6 of you in this group, so let's have 2 number 1s if you know that one of them perhaps is going to struggle a bit. Or if it turns out there's only 4 in a group, you say, that's fine, here you go, I'll just give you the 5th sheet and you can all look at that when you're filling it in. Right, John Hattie, who wrote the Visible Learning, which has become massively influential a few years ago. Actually, this is so he looked at 71,000 studies on education from all over the world and over quite a few years, or he and his team of postgraduate students. And this has carried on. I mean, in fact, he's been doing it probably 30 years now and well over 100,000 studies. And he looked at what were the strategies that really made a difference, what moved education on, and what were the stumbling blocks. And one of the stumbling blocks he found was assessment literacy. He talked about assessment literate pupils. If you think about words like, I don't know, analyze and stuff, those aren't words that we tend to use in daily conversation. It's a very education sort of word. So he thought, actually, a lot of students get to this point where they just, when they come to an exam, it's just using a lot of language which they don't use regularly, and they can get stuck on. Sorry, I really like the sign there that if you're illiterate, you should write to them for free help. And just purely because it amused me, I'll show you a couple of others. And not very appetizing. And there we go. So here's something for you to think about. And just I've the average UK teenager in a school week, how many hours per week will they spend staring at a screen? Now, whether that's their phone, a television, a laptop, computer, or something like that. We're not including school time here, so if they're looking at an interactive board or something, that doesn't count. But how many hours per week will they spend? Okay, now the answer is apparently the average is 55 hours, which is really quite scary. Now contrast that with how many hours will the same UK teenager in the same week spend talking to their parent or guardian? Now there are kind of two answers to this, the first one being 7, which is scary enough. 7 hours of conversation against 55 hours of passively sitting there while stuff sort of drifts over them. But actually, given that they're teenagers, an awful lot of that conversation is, you are not going out dressed like that and you need to tidy your room, etc. How much conversation is actually an exchange of views where they're both listening and thinking about what each other says? It averages out at 30 minutes. So 30 minutes of conversation that will actually make them think against 55 hours of just passively sitting there. So perhaps not surprising then that a lot of academics have become worried about word poverty, and it makes a huge difference because language is how we think in our heads. I mean, entirely personal view with no evidence to back it up. I think perhaps that's why people don't really ever remember things before the age of 2, because we haven't really absorbed language. Our brain doesn't have any way to hold on to and catalogue that information. This slide shows a little girl who was a Romanian orphan, and she had a horrific start to life and just basically extreme neglect, where she was just locked in the room and they shoved a bit of food in occasionally and that was it. Nobody's really spoke to her. Now this was taken shortly after she had been found and taken and actually adopted by an American couple. And you can see, I mean, there's a little bit of that is diet, but a lot of it as well was just no stimulation, just nothing to think about. The more encouraging end to this was that a couple of years later, when they did it again, she hadn't caught up, but she'd made big strides, and they reckon that they'd got her just young enough that they would probably, most of the damage her early upbringing had done would be sort of negated by having a much richer in terms of stimulus upbringing from that point on. So it really is, it's our words are our ability to think about anything. There's another great study that shows the importance of this in the academic literature. If you have a 2,000 word vocabulary, which is slightly on the smaller side, but there was a study done which said they then compared the first 2,000 words that people tend to learn, and they looked at textbooks, exams, all academic literature, and said actually with those 2,000 words you would only access about 73% of academic literature. So over a quarter of it you don't know what it's saying, and it doesn't have to be the whole sentence. If there's one word in a question and you don't know what that is, that might be it. You can't answer that question at all. Now if your vocabulary continued to grow up to 5,000, again in sort of the average of how people learn and the words that they tend to pick up first, those extra 3,000 words only actually add another 10%. So then they got them thinking about, well, what are the words? And they did this massive project, and they came up, they listed 570 words in the end. And they said, if you knew those on top of the basic 2,000, suddenly you're accessing 90%. Now, as I said, one of the benefits of this is that you've got the link there, and in your own time, you can probably go and click on that. And that is a copy of those 570 words. Not all will be relevant for your age group or for your subject, but it's a really, really worthwhile exercise to do, to use that as a starting point, print it off. They're put into groups depending on frequency. So group 1 are the ones that come up most often. Go through the highlighter and think which are the words that we use in our subject. And then maybe what other ones do you see coming up in exams, etc. Because we know that's where they get stuck. Okay, so here's a few written exercises. One is to get them to once they've done a piece of work, get them to rewrite one paragraph with as much alliteration as possible. It just makes them rephrase it. That means they have to think, well, what are the key points? Not word for word substitution, but the general gist. What are the key points they still have to get across? How could they, describe that in different terms? They'll probably pick up a few extra words, especially if you've got some dictionaries for them to look through. I know one class where they, without any input from me really, once I'd set the task, they chose a letter D and then just opened the dictionary and just started reading through the Ds and making notes of the words that sort of would fit the topic before they then wrote this fantastic description. The whole class did it far, far better than I would have thought. Not just the most literal ones, but all of them turned into some really good pieces of work. I did show them this clip, and I'll show it to you because it's short and I like it a lot. Just to really reinforce what alliteration means. I'm sure they didn't understand half of what was said, but they seem to like it anyway. Here we go.
I can assure you I mean you no harm.
Who are you?
Who? Who is but the form following the function of what, and what I am is a man in a mask.
Oh, I can see that.
Of course you can. I'm not questioning your powers of observation. I'm merely remarking upon the paradox of asking a masked man who he is.
Oh, right.
But on this most auspicious of nights, permit me then, in lieu of the more commonplace sobriquet, to suggest the character of this dramatis persona. Voila! In view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. This visage, no mere veneer of vanity, is a vestige of the vox populi, now vacant and vanished. However, this valorous visitation of a bygone vexation stands vivified, and has vowed to vanquish these venal and virulent vermin, vanguarding vice and vouchsafing the violently vicious and voracious violation of felicity. The only verdict is vengeance, a vendetta, held as a votive, not in vain, for the value and veracity of such shall one day vindicate the vigilant and the virtuous. Verily, this vicious swaz of verbiage veers most verbose, so let me simply add that it's my very good honor to meet you, and you may call me V.
Are you like a crazy person?
I'm quite sure they will say so.
There we go. That style, by the way, is called kinetic typography. If there's a famous speech, poem, something like that you're interested in, it's well worth typing the title and kinetic typography into YouTube, because some people out there have done an awful lot of them out there, and it's a really good way of making people focus on what's said rather than the images, which is where we tend to focus. So really quick, because I can see time whizzing away. Another one is to get them to rewrite something but miss out a letter. Again, they have to think of rephrasing, so they change the tense, etc. The more effort we put in, the more likely we are to remember stuff. We'd love there to be a magic wand, which meant that we could revise things effortlessly. Brain just doesn't work like that. It is the effort that makes us remember. So having to reformat information rather than just reread it or rewrite it really makes it sink in. So missing out a letter, retelling something in exactly 50 words. There's a lot of those higher order skills, the evaluation of what's the really key bit. If I write it down, and they'll often write it, all right, it's 56 words, what else can I take out? Or, you know, I've done it in 40 words, what's the next most important thing I can add back in? Slightly more modern version of that, they could summarize it for Twitter. That's quite a nice plenary as well. You know, what was the lesson about in 140 characters? A bigger one takes more time, but it's a lot more interesting to mark than getting 30 identical essays. It's a genre clash. Say, all right, you know, we've looked at this piece of history, or we've looked at this story or something. Rewrite it in a genre that you like, whether that's action films or horror or football commentary or cooking program or, you know, Bake Off or whatever it is. You know, you write the script, and you can do it. I've seen a great geography one which talks about coastal erosion in the sense of a police procedural, and they're talking about the coastal killer and his modus operandi and all this kind of stuff, and it was just much more entertaining. Oh, here's one. This is a nice example of genre clash. See how quickly you can work out which film this is, because it's presented in a completely different style. So there you go. Mary Poppins as you've never seen them before. Okay, what else? Common, shared, unique. This is nice. You can sort of put 3 examples in. It's quite nice to have 2 examples that are sort of similar and then one that's a bit left field to make them think, well, what do they all share? What's shared by each one? It's a nice way just to get them thinking about them individually and a bit more depth. And again, that opportunity for them to really shine, the ones who will give much more developed answers, either in terms of thinking or prior knowledge. That's the same thing, just drawn as a Venn diagram with a kind of geography example. This is really worth saying. So this is the story of Adam and Eve. So what I've done is I've picked a few aspects out and scattered them around, and then the students have to draw connections. Any 2 they can see a link between. They draw a little arrow and they write what it was. So God used a rib from Adam to make Eve, etc. This makes them think about the importance of every different aspect of it rather than sometimes just a narrative. And also just say, don't do one connection. If you can take a 10, put 10 on. The challenge is how many can you do? A really good tip for this as well is to have some sort of more concrete details of the story and then a couple of abstract things like temptation and sin. Because if they can work out how those apply to the story as well, they've really understood it well. Another way to make it a bit more challenging, if it's you just need them to get some basic information out of some text, is to say, instead of the questions, these are the answers. The bits that you've underlined or highlighted somehow, that's the answer. Write a question for which that is the answer, and then put them both down. So they say, all right, where is ice hockey played? On a large flat area of ice. It just takes that a little bit more thought. I know we're very short on time now, but I'm really interested to see what you come up with. Again, if you can come up with a picture that's interesting but somehow linked to the lesson, it's a particularly nice starter of saying, come up with who can come up with the best caption, or which the best newspaper title, tabloid or broadsheet. This is you're okay. I'm not going to sing to you. Geography teacher that I worked with was constantly frustrated by the fact that the kids had no idea of where anything was, even in Britain, and even if it wasn't actually on the syllabus, he just wanted to do one lesson. So what we did was we just sat down one lunchtime and quickly rewrote a song that we knew well with as many puns in as we could possibly do. And he set this as a task. He gave this as an example, said to them, right, you've all got a map, an atlas of England in front of you. I want you to write out a song you know well and then see how many. And it just meant they spent an hour staring at maps and studying them. And they really enjoyed it. But I'm sure a lot of that kind of sunk in. Now, unfortunately, because of time, I'm going to have to skip over quite a few. Some of these, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. There you go, I do like that. But I'm going to skip, so bear with me. Sorry about this. Let's get to the end. Just the last couple of bits. Okay, some nice ideas here. Find the fib, another really nice plenary. Write 3 statements about the lesson, 2 which are true and 1 that's false. And if they're really good, they'll do 1 that's almost true but not quite, and then they can test them out on each other and see who can fool the class. Odd one out. There are lots and lots of reasons. You could say Mondra because it's in a different font, or you could say Boo because it's bigger, and those visual ones are the easiest. Down to Bois is the only one that begins with a B, and then you can have one of them is an irregular past participle, and if your French is a lot better than mine, I'm sure you can come up with loads. But the idea is not to limit them one. There's not one correct answer. They quite rightly are tons. How many can they think of? Let me see. That's really nice. If you can give them artifacts or pictures of something, say, okay, you're the curator in the museum or the art gallery. This is what your exhibition's about. You can only show 1 out of these 3 tends to work well. I put 2 because that just fitted on the slide nicely. So this would be Jesus. You can only put 1 of them up. Which one would you choose and why? And if you give them a little bit of written information about them, that will help, and they have to be able to explain and justify their decision. Okay, so ideally, if we can use these techniques, we get students challenged, engaged with what they're doing, enjoying their learning, and making that progress. And if that's the case, we should never see answers like these. Name one measure which could be put into place to avoid river flooding in times of extensive rainfall in Mississippi. I suppose that's one way of doing it, but probably not the one they intended. And also this, the old classic, and my personal favourite, what is the highest frequency noise that a human can register? Mariah Carey. I think that's got to get full marks. If any of this has been remotely useful, I really hope it has. All of it, along with an awful lot more, is in my book, Stretch and Challenge, which is on Amazon as well as other things. And purely because this really entertained me, I'll just show you when it was first published and it came out on Amazon. If you typed in my name, there were two items that would have come up. One of them was the Stretch and Challenge for All book, and the other one, which just shows an interesting kind of algorithm at work here, was a G-string with the Mexican flag on it. I have no idea what the connection was there. I'd like to say I don't endorse it. That's thankfully not me modelling them, but that did entertain me a lot. So I will show you the final slide, again, really just because it's entertains me. It's another example of genre clash. It's my favourite one, but as you'll see, it's not one that I'll ever be able to show the kids.
Peace up, A-Town. At Barrow High, Ramses was the biggest player around. No doubt. But when the new kid in school, strange lad, realized hanging with the in crowd wasn't so easy, he took a stand. Man shall be ruled by law, not by the will of other men. Moses. Now the battle is on to see who can get the girl who will rule the school. And if a zero can become a hero, so let the games begin. From the creators of Must Love Draws comes a comedy 3,000 years in the making. You're a sharp, broad, treacherous little. Did you hear that? Charlton Heston, Will Brenner, Sinead O'Connor, and Samuel L. Jackson as Principal Firebush. What happened here was a miracle, and I want you to fucking acknowledge it. 10 things I hate about commandments.
There we go. So I'm pretty sure that my email is up there if I can be of any help. I mean, I am a full-time teacher, so you might have to be a little bit patient with me getting back to you. But the reason I do this is I know full well how hard teachers work, and I do want to try and be helpful. So by all means, if anything comes up that you think of later after this is all finished, then I will reply. Thanks very much. Over to you, Gary, I guess.
Right, thanks very much, Torsten. So based on feedback, we usually like to give you an additional reading list. So obviously we've got Torsten's book there, Stretch and Challenge for All, and there's other suggestions of other books. And we've also included a couple of web links for you, which we will send out after the webinar.
Next slide, please, Torsten. So I just want to say a massive thank you to the following people, or the following companies that have supported this webinar. First of all, Elementary Technology, who let us use the software, and then the other people, Kronos Publishing, NACE and CGP, who have given us donated some prizes, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. And there's Torsten's email address as well. So big thank you to Torsten for giving up your time and helping teachers to improve. I learned some really new techniques there that I've not used before. So I'll definitely be trying them in my classroom. So thank you, Torsten. Next slide, please.
As this is my favourite part of the webinar, is all the competition winners. I think we've done some fantastic prizes, and it's with thanks to Elementary Technology and the other companies that we've linked with to enable to offer these prizes. So these are just some names of some of our previous winners from our last webinar. So there's £25 vouchers from Amazon, from Elementary Technology. So Emma Saunders, I'm not sure how I'm going to pronounce that name, but I'll let you all read that for yourselves. And then Tassamai, which is an absolutely fantastic resource. They donated 2 trees. and the winners were Lucy Worthington and Craig Holden. And from our last webinar that John Tate delivered with us, his books, that 3 copies were won by the 3 people listed there. So well done to everybody, and look forward to the winners of for this competition.
Okay, next slide, Torsten. So this is the competitions. We've got 4 this time to give away some really cool prizes. Thank you to these companies. So first of all, as always, Elementary Technology. They let us use their webinar software. They design our logos. They do all sorts for us for free. Absolutely amazing. They sell anything technology for your school. So if you're interested, check them out. You want a new whiteboard or projector or visualizer, then they're the place to go. They're giving away this time 2 prizes of a £25 Lindt chocolate hampers. I think I'll be entering that one as well. I'm getting quite hungry. The next one is from the National Association for Able Children in Education. Just a little bit about them. They're an independent charity, and they support schools to develop high quality provision for more able learners. And the context which they do is Challenge for All, just like Torsten was discussing in the webinar. They have a membership. Schools can sign up to a membership, and it's just £95 a year, and everyone in the school will have access to that. Free resources, practical resources on Challenge for All, support and CPD. They are offering 5 copies of the latest research, which they've spent quite a long time putting together, which is called Making Space for Able Learners. And that's normally £12 each in the UK, and I think it's a bit more expensive if you're outside the UK. And they're also offering, until December the 18th, 20% discount for anyone who's come to the webinar today using that code on the website. So check out their website. They've got loads of articles as well on there, which you can have a look at. Then our friends at CGP, if you've worked in education in the UK or in schools which do the UK curriculum, you'll probably be familiar with CGP. They are been going since 1996, and they produce amazing revision guides, revision cards, retrieval practice books, all sorts of stuff for all key stages. And they've donated us 3 vouchers. I think there's actually a 5, a 10 and a 20 actually they've given us. And then finally, Crown House Publishing, who were kind enough to tell us all about Torsten, offering 2 copies of Torsten's book worth £24.99 each. And all you have to do to enter these competitions is just fill in our feedback form. We will put the link in the chat at the end, and also it should load up when you leave the webinar. It should automatically load up. So we will be doing the draw on the 22nd of November at 3:30, and then we'll announce the winners the week after. For a couple of these competitions, you do have to sign up to a mailing list, but you can unsubscribe at any time if you want to. So if you want to enter a couple of those competitions, you will have to do that. Next slide, Torsten.
Okay, so this is a really exciting idea that we've got, is to offer people the chance to volunteer and come forward to do either a live webinar, or if you don't want to do a live one, you can just work with us to produce a little video on content that you're comfortable with to support other teachers in the UK and around the world. So some example topics you can see on the screen: metacognition, curriculum design, any of those. If you would really be interested in working with us and doing your own little video, as a thank you for that, you will receive one of our new mugs. And I need to say a massive thanks to Ed Fairfield from Elementary Technology. He's designed these. I think they absolutely look fantastic, and I can't wait to get mine. So thanks very much for that, and please do get in touch if you want to work with us. We'll provide all the technology and everything, and we'll just use your expertise.
And just on that, if you want to do sign up for that, then on the feedback form there is a box that you can tick to say that you know what you're interested in delivering something. So we've had loads of requests from people in our feedback of all different kinds of topics, and obviously we can only do so much, and we've only got so much expertise, particularly primary school. We're both secondary teachers, so we don't have a lot of experience in that. So we'd love to get you guys involved as well and help us help more teachers. Next slide, Torsten. So you can obviously contact us on our social media as well. So we've got a Facebook group, our Twitter handle is @TNT Teaching, and then we've also got a YouTube channel where we put all our webinars and all our videos and stuff that we make, and they're all free. They'll always be free. So go on there, subscribe to our channel, and watch as many of the videos as you want and share with everybody. Next slide. So what we thought we'd do now is just do a quick instant win. So we thought we'd give away one of the books live, one of Torsten's books live tonight. So if you've got a PC, can you just go over to Kahoot, type in Kahoot in Google, and I'm going to display it on the, I'm going to put a link to the Kahoot quiz on the screen now. We're going to have a little bit of a game. Please put your real name in so we know who to contact at the end. And then I'm just going to share this screen if that's okay, Torsten.
Yeah, yep, you go for it.
So let's go here. So it's going to load the game pin, so you should be able to see my screen with the game pin. So go on to Kahoot, and if you played Kahoot before, it should be quite familiar to you. Just type in the code which is on the screen. And it's going to be fastest finger first. So at the end of it, the person who gets the highest points will win a copy of Torsten's book. So I'll just give us a check how many people we've got still here. 146. So I'll just give you a minute or so to sign up, then we'll start. There's only 5 questions. So if you've not used Kahoot before, it's a really cool thing to try. The free version, you can only do 5 questions, but sometimes that's all you need is a quick plenary or quick starter. Let's give another 30 seconds for people to join up. I can't believe how many people we've got playing. I don't think I've ever played a Kahoot this big. Okay, just another 10 seconds, then we'll start. Okay, so this is all about, the questions are all based on Torsten's webinar tonight. Hopefully there's not a question in there that he hasn't done. I don't think there is, but we'll see. Okay, let's make a start. So sorry if you've not had a chance to sign up. Here we go. Which one of these was not featured as a genius in the presentation? Was it Newton, Mozart, Einstein, or Beethoven? Oh, fast, really fast there with the answers. Torsten, do you remember this one?
I actually am looking at still at a different screen, so I can't actually see it.
All right, okay. Yeah, so the answer was Einstein was not mentioned. The other 3 were mentioned. So well done to those people who got it right. So the points at the top, Annie, well done. You're in the lead at the moment. Fastest finger first. Next question. So which one of these is the lowest form of challenge? Is it apply, remember, understand, or analyze? Okay, it was remember. Well done. Most people got that one correct. So the leader at the moment is Sandra's going to the lead. Well done, Sandra. Must have been fast on that one. Okay, next one. Which psychologist carried out the social loafing experiment? Was it Latain, Zimbardo, Freud, or Maslow? Yes, it was Latain. Well done to those 40 people who got that correct. And the winner so far is Sandra, still in the lead. Annie's very, very close. And people have Haley's come up there and Emily's gone up on her score. So question 4, 2 questions left. A 2,000 word vocabulary will access what percentage of academic literature? Is it 73%, 58%, 71%, or 83%? sorry if you joined the webinar late and you didn't get to this part or missed this part. The answer was 73%. Well done, those 50 people. So who's in the lead? Has it changed? No, still Sandra. Well done, Sandra. And the final question, everyone, is what is the name of Torsten's book? Is it Stretch and Challenge for Students, Stretch and Challenge for Schools, Stretch and Challenge for All? I've spelled that wrong. Or Stretch and Challenge for Everyone? Ignore the spelling. Yeah, it was Stretch and Challenge for All. So 62 people. So the winner of the book, will contact you after the webinar. We've got your email address. Is podium for third place is Haley Hedger. Well done, Haley. Second is Annie. And first is Sandra. Well done, Sandra. You led that quite from the beginning, so well done. So we'll send a free book out to you, Sandra. Well done. Thank you very much for playing, everybody else. And let's just go back to the webinar and share the screen. And can you see my screen, Avril?
I can't see it now.
Okay, sorry, everyone. Can you see it now?
I'm still viewing Torsten's screen.
Okay, no problem. I think that's it, everyone. I think we've come to the end of the webinar. We'll just have a look if there's any questions, Torsten. I'll just have a flick through. Has anyone got any questions? Just got people asking about the certificate.
Yeah, certificate ones.
So there is a question in the feedback form for you to put your official name that you want on the certificate. If you do want a certificate, it's an optional question for you to fill in. And I think there's nothing else in there, Torsten.
Okay, excellent. Well, if people think of it, anything later, as I said, my email address is there, so they can always drop me an email.
Yeah, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We've just gone over by 5 minutes, which is pretty good for us. So thank you very much. And we will be doing another one, a Christmas special one in December. We've got another special guest, and it's going to be quite interesting. So hopefully we'll see you at the next one as well. So thanks everyone for spending your time and evening, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.